To the Casual Hour, a podcast ostensibly about video games, but mostly about feelings. What sort of feelings? Game feelings. Guys, tonight, this is a deep dive, and we're going to talk about what is known as game feel. Now, when I say that, what do you two think of when you hear those words?
I love feeling games. I think the best feeling game is probably WarioWare Twisted. Like it had that nice like large thing. Yeah, I bop it. That's a great feeling game.
Okay,
That's
I'm not talking about how the games physically feel.
Like
the
cartridge. Nice.
I'm talking about. Yes, Bobby, go ahead.
I know you're not talking about this, but I think that my brain goes down like how did the game make me feel versus how playing the game
I think
feels.
that ties into it. Yeah, like I'm talking mostly about how a game feels to play, but how the game makes you feel in turn is also a key part of this.
I don't think directly like a games for impact category like we've had in some of the other stuff that we've talked about. But
this is more so the act of play. What happens when your guy moves on the screen and interacts with the world around him.
It's like a mechanical emotion, or something that evokes from. I would say it's more of like a mechanics thing than certainly like a story thing or something like. I know we were all pretty bummed when Bobby the Bob-Omb died, but like that's not really a game feel thing. That's more of
felt it.
Somebody wrote a thing. Oh yes, sure.
I felt it too.
If you don't feel something, you don't feel anything.
Some kind of monster. So to me, it is an amalgamation of all the different parts of the game coming together to form something whole to be experienced by the player. And like any piece of complex machinery, one small facet not being up to snuff can just drag the whole thing down with it. Turning, what could have been something really great into something that's just, serviceable, just kind of okay. There may be pieces that stand out or a narrative that keeps pulling you forward, but there'll always be this nagging feeling in the back of your head that things just aren't as good as they could have been or should be. I was thinking about this. This is an episode I've kind of had in my head for a few months now, because it's something we talk about a lot, and I wasn't able to find a whole lot of stuff of people discussing this. Like, it's not.
It's a weird thing for people to try and articulate.
Yeah,
it's a very nebulous topic. For sure.
Yeah.
Like even I found some old talks at, I don't think it was GDC's, but it was there was like a game feel conference.
Yes.
And most of the people that did talks on it were saying, I don't really like this term because it doesn't mean anything. And it's like, yeah, I kind of agree, but like to be able to talk about it at all, and I think there is something worth talking about here, and I'm glad we're doing this deep dive. It is a weird phrase that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Exactly.
It's also like, not to like use this fucking dated or gross term, but like people have said like porn when you see it, and I think that like
I had that exact thought.
Yeah, and like
earlier this week, as I was like,
it's like you
thinking
can't describe
about all this,
but you know it when you see it. And I think when you talk to somebody who understands games and like, or at least has played more than one game and can say like this game feels differently, specifically a game like in a genre. Like I've played a few sports games, or I've played a few racing games. This racing game feels significantly different, to the tune of like, hey, this is Cruising USA and this is Forza Motorsports. Like those feel very different. Well, explain why is that? And it's more than one as a sim versus an arcade, because that's genre, but the game responds differently, and it's one of those things where you know it when you experience it, and you know it when somebody's talking to you about it.
Yeah.
Like even at a more fundamental level, like we think about video games, you think about jumping.
Yeah.
Jumping is like one of those.
We are going to talk about that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, jump is what I've used for a lot of my research here. Jump is what
there's a very different feeling between a jump in a Super Mario Brothers and a jump in a Little Big Planet, let's say.
Yeah, I hope that,
and I think that leads to a lot of feels.
So leading into our discussion we're going to have about platformers, I have this quote from an article from a website that no longer exists that was linked to in Gamma Sutra, but it's talking about when they were developing Super Mario 64.
They're not even called Kama Sutra anymore, right?
Yeah. So it says, before any levels had been created, and this is for Super Mario 64, like I said, Mr. Miyamoto had Mario running around and picking up objects in a small garden, which he uses in all his games to test gameplay elements. A lot of the animation was actually in there before any of the game, explains this person talking in the interview. The Mario that he had running around basically looked the same as he did in the final version. Mario's movement is based on good physics, but you have bits on top that you plug in so you can do things that you shouldn't be able to do. They spent a lot of time working on the swimming. It's harder than running to get the feeling right. They didn't want you to avoid the water and wanted to make it an advantage and fun to dive in. So before they even built the game, they just had this thing where you could run around as Mario. And it wasn't until they nailed how it felt to jump and flip and somersault and do all these things with Mario that they built these things up around him. And that
makes sense. Like if you built Mario, if you tried to figure out Mario's physics and then simultaneously we're also trying to figure out level design, you'd be going back and forth on both of them. Because this platform is now a little too high from where we have Mario, so let's move this platform. Oh wait, you know what? I don't like the way that Mario jumps on this sequence, so let's change the way Mario moves. And then if you've moved anything, if you've ever played a game like Super Mario Maker, you'd realize that if one change to the physics happened here, it would change
just the whole thing comes
everything.
crashing down.
Absolutely. So especially for a platformer like that. But I think a lot of games do that, at least now.
I feel it's so important too, though. I mean, like, even when Apple designed the iPad and the iPhone, they had the inertia scrolling was like the very first thing that they had hammered out for all of that. And beyond like the enclosures, beyond the other things on it, like that was the first thing. They wanted it to feel a certain way when you interact with it.
That buttery smoothness.
And I think about that too with the games that you're talking about. Like there's an aspect of, like, especially the story you just shared, like they knew how the game should feel before the game was ready to even become the game. Like they had and that's where they started.
Yeah, they're not going to go out and design Bob-omb Field before they know how Mario is going to be playing.
And if you can't make Mario feel good in 3D, they just would have never made the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I love hearing stories like that from around that time, especially like as 3D games were a thing that all of these studios who had previously worked in 2D were trying to figure out how to make work and do good. And I, like, just speaking from personal experience in the last handful of months, like I put a good amount of time into Super Mario 64. I think that game holds up. Like it still feels fun to play.
How many A presses did you use?
How many what?
A presses, or did you use half A presses?
Half A press? Oh, I didn't. No, I mean I'm playing on my Retroid, so I can't exactly do that.
Okay.
It's almost though like you mentioned it though, with that being one of the very first experiences in a 3D space. Like we've talked at length, like one deep dive a long time ago about controllers. And like how we have the same input layout that we've had for decades now, because that works. It's been changed a little bit in some capacity, but
some buttons have been added. Like the shape is moved around a little bit.
You've got your
touchpads and things like that.
Yeah.
And now when you think about like what they did with Mario, especially from like an action platformer in a 3D space, like that could be looked at as they've definitely made him feel much better, and they've done a lot more with physics, but the core value of what that character does in that space,
his moveset is essentially the same.
Right. Even on like Mario Odyssey. Like Mario Odyssey felt almost identical from like I picked that controller up, and outside of some of the new things they did with the hat and Cappy, but like the interacting with your environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And they added
there from what it was.
You know, the dive where you could throw your hat and dive forward and then bounce off of it.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of those moves,
a really good move, by the way.
The same thing that they've been since I was a kid. And so yeah, the first genre I wanted to really talk about was platformers, because that's relatable. Everyone has played a platformer.
You get it, and you get it down to its bare essentials. Like we said, like the jump, I think is the easiest way to tell if a game feels good or feels bad. Yeah,
and why does Mario feel so good when you make him jump? And
it's also interesting that Mario's jump has changed over the years. Like you had people who would play Super Mario Maker and they're like, oh yeah, this is exactly how the jumps worked in Super Mario Brothers. Then they go back to original Super Mario Brothers and go, oh wait, no, he falls so much faster. Yeah. Oh my goodness, like this doesn't feel the same at all. I mean, it still feels good, and at that time it felt great. But even now, they're still fine tuning what we feel like is like the third rail, which is you don't change Mario's jump because that's the perfection. No, they absolutely have changed Mario's jump. It just still feels good to you, so you don't really notice.
Yeah, they've
unless you're that bastard Luigi from Mario 2.
Oh, yeah,
he's kind of floaty. I did like Princess Peach though. It was fun to glide around. Yeah. So my question to you guys was like, how would you define a platformer that feels good to play? Like outside of, like, we all know Mario feels good, but are there any other platformers that you remember from when you were younger that you think you could go back to and be like, oh yeah, this is still good. This feels good to play.
I mean, Mario dominates a lot of my thought process.
What about like a Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, a Spyro?
Yeah, I mean, like I played definitely more Banjo. I don't think, Chase, you played Banjo if I remember our offline talks, but I didn't play a lot of Spyro, and I didn't have a PlayStation, so I didn't play Crash at the time.
Same.
But I mean, for me, it was Mario.
Yeah,
that kind of defined like what I would expect from it. And so like when I think about a platform, I'm thinking about, is it responsive? Is it tight? Like those are two things that like I always look at.
It's what all the other ones strive to be as good as, and none of them are.
I will say, like
I mean, there are definitely other good platformers out there.
Fine, sure. But when we think of like the greatest platformers of all time, the bulk of that list is probably going to be Mario games, right?
I mean, if I'm going to get to like modern, you want me to stay back in the day, or me to like say like, hey, here's a game like a.
I think from Super Mario Brothers onward, like
I think about Ori.
Well, we got like Sonic 2 in there.
Absolutely, put a Sonic 2.
Yeah.
Sonic had
Ori. Ori is a good contemporary platformer.
Sure. Those Rayman games, those 2D Rayman games, Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. I know people talked a lot about those.
Yeah.
The DK games, the DK Country Returns and DK Tropical Freeze. I know people talk a lot about those.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country?
I never played Donkey Kong Country. I played Donkey Kong Land on my Game Boy.
Yeah, it's good. I think depends on how you feel about minecarts and the barrel shooting. I didn't love some of those things. I liked rolling around as Donkey Kong. I liked bouncing off of the crocodile enemies. I can't remember their name off the top of my head.
Diddy's cartwheel and Donkey Kong's double hand slap on the ground. Like, those two mechanics felt so good in those games.
I mean, the ground pound from Smash Bros. I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, which and like Dixie's like hair whip, and then also like a helicopter that she would use in Diddy Kong's Quest. Like,
I don't certainly like the minecarts, but I don't like the cannons. But I think the stuff between those, very good.
Yeah. A more contemporary game that I've been thinking about a lot this week too, when I think about platformers, is Celeste.
Absolutely.
I think like Celeste controls so well, and you're able to fine tune exactly how it feels to move that sprite around on the screen to like suit your skill level,
right?
And like make it the best version of that game for yourself. And I think that's really neat. That like being able to appeal to that many people, to bring in people who may not be that good at platformers and make it an enjoyable experience for them is really cool.
Where would you all put Metroids here? Because like I think about Metroid Dread felt so good to play. It had such a great feel to it.
I mean, Metroidvanias are, I would consider that its own. Like there's platforming involved,
but they're not platformers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like the only thing we've talked about in the platformers are the way that you move. Because like I would bring up something like Super Meat Boy as one that is a game that just feels really good to move.
Yes.
But that game also does so many other things that aren't about movement that still makes it feel good. Right. The way that you snap immediately to trying again. Yeah. The way that they show you at the end all your failed attempts, the way that there's permanence to the way that that your Meat Boy, as he goes over pieces of ground, he stains them red. So you can kind of have an idea of what you did before and use that as a guide going forward to know, I went too far, I didn't go far enough. Like that stuff I think all contributes to game feel and has nothing to do with how Super Meat Boy jumps or how fast he moves. But it does make a huge difference when it comes to something like how a game feels. Yeah. So I don't mind when Bobby brings up something like Metroid. I haven't played a ton of Metroid games. I know that usually I don't like the way Nintendo has done, what is it called, the space jump? Like not necessarily like the double jump, but like the one where Samus can infinitely jump. I haven't really liked the way they use that. I don't think I've enjoyed the wall jumps. I can't remember if Metroid wall jumps you have to hold the other direction as you hit the jump button instead of like... Because like Mario ones or like Mega Man X I would also put up there. It's like you are running into the wall, you are hitting the button while you're still holding the direction towards the wall. And for Mega Man X especially, you're able to just go up those walls by rapidly hitting the jump button as you hold that direction. And that just feels so good. Whereas if I remember right, Metroid games, you kind of had to be holding the other direction as you jumped, and it made it a little bit more difficult for me to grok how I'm clinging onto walls. I'm also jumping.
I understand what you were saying earlier about like Metroidvanias, but the more I think about it, like the core mechanics of like interacting through a level, I truly believe is present there. Like Dead Cells, I think has a lot of that in it as well. I think even like a Cuphead has some of that in it. It's more of a run-based game, but like that's absolutely using some platforming in those levels for sure. I really liked on Super Nintendo, fucking that Mickey Mouse platformer.
Shit.
He would have like... Is that Castle of Illusion?
Yes. The one where he had like the different outfits through the different stories. Like I thought that was fucking cool at the time.
I need to play that game. It was cool. It always makes lists, and it's
been on so many different systems, and so many of them I think are slightly different. Like there's a Genesis version that I think is not exactly the same as the SNES version.
There's a Game Boy version too, isn't there?
I think so. There's a Game Gear version. I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, they made a lot of different like Mickey games that all control pretty well.
Ninja Gaiden and stuff like that. Like, where does that land? Like,
oh god,
like,
oh fuck that game. I mean, fuck that game so much.
Is it hard or is it the feel or what was it for that? Because I'd love to know. Like, if that's a feel, I want to hear about it.
It's just, I mean, the act of running around and like doing all these cool ninja moves feels good. It's just that game's fucking hard, man. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's like enemy placement, the way the birds move. Like, I don't think it's so much of how Ryu moves. It's more about how you navigate the levels they made. They just made it difficult.
I mean, would you call Spelunky a platformer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's up there too. I
love Spelunky. Spelunky is one of my... Yeah.
Yeah, Dig 2 especially. Like, just all the momentum things they put on there.
All the gear they give you.
We didn't talk about it earlier. But that new Ratchet and Clank that came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that and like
tearing through the space-time shifts.
Kana, Bridge of Spirits. Like, I think that you think about like old school like platforming tactics. Like Kana really feels kind of like a Banjo-Kazooie, like similar layout for what you would be doing there with some of the interactivity with that world. And that even goes back to that 360 launch title, Camino. What was that one called? Not Cameo, that's Star Wars.
Cameo.
Elements. Yeah. So like stuff like that. Like, I think platforming is a really big I mean, I know it's not, but I would even like be the asshole that would say it right now that Titanfall 2 has one of the best platforming levels I've played in a long time.
Yeah. Sure. I don't think you're an asshole for that. I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Cool. All right. Any other thoughts or games that you think of for platforms before we move on to our next genre?
I'm sure they'll come up as we start to talk about this and jog each other's memory.
So
yeah, and again, it's weird. I don't mind going around this by genre, but there is something about like it's the Super Mario World feels great, obviously. There's so many different things you can point to that feels great. From hey, the character moves and that feels good. You look at the cape. Like you look at where Mario was before Super Mario Brothers 3. I love Super Mario Brothers 3. I like it more than World, but not because of game feel, because of all sorts of other things. But you think about how they went from Tanuki Suit Mario and the way that you would glide, or the way that you'd have to build your P meter to be able to fly, and that system was fine. It was great at the time.
Now you got a cape.
Now you got a cape,
and you can
look at all the crazy physics you can do with the cape. The way that you can fly infinitely if you are able to manipulate things right. The way that you can pull it back at any time and get that little extra height, or the way that you're able to hold forward and have him slam down faster. All that stuff feels really good.
I remember when I realized I could kick turtle shells directly up.
Sure.
It just ripped a hole in my mind.
Chase, I mean, it's I don't comprehend it. When I was a kid playing that for the first time, you're not comprehending how incredible that mechanic was, because it felt so fucking natural. It really did. Like, it felt like a natural response on how to make it move.
Like, of course Mario can fly.
But the two other things in that game that stand out to my mind from a feel standpoint: charging Chuck, when you're bouncing on his head, and that response you get from him, and how
tap to tap.
Yes, and then also,
and I think sound effects have a huge impact on that stuff as well.
But the whole jumping off of Yoshi to make it through a gap, even that mechanic, and how you would use the physics of pushing off of this dinosaur,
sending Yoshi to his death.
Yeah, but even that, it's funny, but I often wonder, not often, but I'm wondering right now, how much work really went into making that feel as good as it did. How much time did they obsess
and how much
about
of that stuff was accidents too. Okay, we've built Yoshi to function in a certain way. We need to have the player be able to jump off Yoshi, obviously. And then you get to points where players go, oh wait, I can just dump Yoshi here and jump off him where there's a pit where they probably designed the game not to need that. Because that's that's something you have to do to get to secret exits or things like that. But I'm sure that's stuff that comes in later and not something that's necessarily originally intended. But then you play around in that kind of Mario 64 sandbox that Johnny was talking about, and you go, oh, if I actually use this combination of moves, it can make this happen. Maybe we can turn that into a game mechanic or a level design mechanic as we're playing through. Bobby, you mentioned Charge and Chuck and the tap, and I want to talk about sound effects, because I think sound effects make a huge difference on a lot of things. And when I'm thinking about sound effects, one, I think about going back to Super Mario World. When you do throw a turtle shell, there's that one level, I can't remember which level it is, but you immediately you get the turtle shell and you get to throw it, and it just kills that long line of Koopas. It's the way that the pitch goes up, or the note goes up every time it hits one on that xylophone. It tickles your brain. And it feels good. It makes you feel good because it does feel good. And I would also go back to Sonic as well. When you're doing that spin dash and you have that, you only have to hit it once to be able to do the spin dash. But I would hold down and just tap it all the time. You just rev that shit like an engine, and it's so good.
The car that you have, the toy car.
That, you're just pulling that ripcord.
And it only goes so far, but you're going to keep charging it because you can go faster, and you let it go.
This is going exactly how I wanted it to go. Thank you guys. Sonic. Dude, I would mash on that for 10 seconds before I start. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So let me ask you this then, because
yes.
How come, if we're talking about the way the audio and you're pushing that button down, the person that when they're playing and they're trying to jump, they move the controller up?
Oh, dude. When I first started playing Mario Kart, I would turn the Super Nintendo controller. Because I thought it would make Mario turn sharper.
And do you imagine that Nintendo might have said in their meetings, people do this. What if we made a console that made it so it actually made a difference?
Absolutely.
And then you get something like the Wii, and then you literally are moving your controller to turn in Mario Kart, or to hit the tennis racket. And honestly, even today, I'm still pretty excited by that. They announced the Nintendo Switch Sports.
Yeah.
I'm like, hell yeah, I'm ready to get back in and play some tennis and bowl and eventually play golf. I'm looking forward to it. I can't be around for the test. I'll be out of town, unfortunately, but I'm very excited to get back into those games.
Yeah, man.
So it's weird. Like it's I guess like a compliment in the same hand too is like when we can make games extensions of our own thoughts and movements. Like I think that's a pretty big testament to feel, at least for me, is like it's almost like, this is such a weird thing to say, it's almost like breathing. Like you don't think about breathing, you just kind of do it. And like when you play a game, like you're not thinking about the nuanced movements. Like you're not thinking about like,
but you're definitely thinking about when you're not breathing correctly or when something is disrupting your breathing. Yes. You know it.
You know it. And I think that like even like the subtleties, I mean, like we've talked about a lot of Mario, but like the first one, like if you think about like how many assets they had available to them when they did that game and the ability to make some sort of velocity and inertia come across, like when Mario stopped, he had to skid. And like even those types of things in a game back then were pretty unheard of and never been done before. And like from a feel, like you knew that you were going to have to kind of plan for that. So like as you were somebody working through a level, you knew
or
that
pull back before you get all the way across.
100%.
You don't skid and slide off into a pit. Yeah.
There was a feel, like I don't care what you say, like you felt it, like you knew that if I jumped from this point, I would not make it to the top of the flagpole. And there was a feel there that you would know, like if I was only like a few blocks further, I would do it. And so like even at a very early point in this, when it came to game feel and game design, like your mind and your ability to input to, at the time, a D-pad and 2 buttons, you knew if I was holding down a button to go faster and I released it to jump at this point in time, I could make the distance needed. So the feel aspect has always been there, and it's allowed you to do it. And I mean, like, I know we're going to talk about it, but I think that like the feel in Dark Souls is what either turns people away from it or into it, because you know, like that sword's going to take this long to swing, or this shield's gonna, like, I know we're going to talk about it. I know it's coming.
I mean,
I think it's important to note, though. I don't think we've said against it. In fact, I think we hinted at it a couple times. But just because one game feels good doesn't mean you can take all of those same mechanics and transfer it to another game. Like we mentioned that Celeste feels good, Super Mario World feels good, but I don't think you can put Celeste's moveset into Mario. If you put Celeste's moveset and physics into Mario World, you're going to have a bad time. It might not feel good because feeling also has... You have to build the game around that as well. Like it can be fine to jump around a gray box world and be okay, but you're also trying to design a video game around it, and that feel has to contribute to the way that the design of the levels are made as well.
A gray box world, you just described my paradise. Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, so I want to talk about Titanfall 2, because I was thinking a lot.
That's really, always, let's be honest, that's what started this idea for you, isn't it? Dude,
I'm never not thinking about Titanfall.
I would when you said you want to do game feel back in 2021, I was like, oh, this motherfucker's been playing Titanfall again. I knew exactly what was going on.
I did play some Titanfall last year.
That's what I'm saying.
And then, so we're going to talk about Titanfall. Like, there's a couple of specific things I wanted to talk about for sure. One was Titanfall. The other is Destiny. And we will get to Destiny after I give you this little spiel about Titanfall. So,
sure.
Yeah, like I was thinking this week, like, you know, what games have impacted me the most, and like how I feel when I'm playing them, how they feel to play, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, for Titanfall, this is what I wrote, okay? I said, the wall run, the slide, the grappling hook, the sound of a Titan dropping from the sky and landing in a cloud of dust, and the shooting ain't bad either. The on-the-ground combat outside of your Titan can be just as thrilling as what you experience once you earn a Titan drop. Once inside the Titan, though, it takes on a whole new dimension. Your movement is slowed, but the weapons each Titan has is as distinct as the classes you pick for your pilot, and you feel invincible as you mow down enemy combatants. Facing off against other Titans is a brilliant dance, waiting on your ult to charge, popping off electric fog to stop would-be battery thieves from draining your Titan, and even having to mash X to eject so you can take a shot at the Titan who knocked you out, is just great. You shoot into the air, way above the fray, and you land amidst the chaos of the battlefield. And then sometimes you and the other enemy Titan eject at the same time, and you face off in midair. And I don't know. It made me feel a way that few things ever have while I was playing them. And I know you guys both like Titanfall too, but I think I am the resident huge fan.
The thing about that game for me that I think they had to figure out, and hearing you talk through those, I think is incredibly detailed. But not only did it have to feel good, but you had to make people want to be as compelled to be in or out of the suit or the
yes.
And I think that's like a big deal here. Is like
it's a cool robot. Why wouldn't I want to be in that the whole time I'm playing this game?
And like the advertising was clearly showing off these really cool mechs. They're mechs, right? Not mechas, but mechs. Is that correct?
Sure.
They're Titans, but
they're Titans.
Okay.
Yes.
So they have the Titans all over it. You know that's going to be badass when you see those things, but then you have like the grapple, you have the wall run, the slick sliding, all that shit that's really cool. And to your point, the shooting ain't bad either. But even just the like getting into your suit mechanic and like being like in the game, like being caught and put into it, like the way that they make the camera look,
jumping from any angle, and you either like climbing through the top or he grabs you and he pops you in his chest.
Like those things, there's something that made it feel like organic and human, like, like the Iron Giant or one of these things where you had this companion that you could be a part of. Like those are things that I felt they really had to get right, and they made it more tangible in that sense. Like they added a layer of feel to it, both emotionally but also stylistically in the game, that made like there's something comforting to know that you were getting grabbed by your Titan. They did a good job of that.
They really, in the campaign especially,
right.
Like that's the whole, is like, this is your buddy. Like this is
absolutely. So I think
he's going to look out for you.
There, like the thing that we talked about, like
protect
audio
the pilot.
cues, correct. Like that's their job.
Yeah.
But you are also looking out for one another, and that transcends into the gameplay as well. To know that like they did a fantastic job of creating that story and that emotion and that feel, which I think is at the heart of that game feeling as good as it does.
And I think that's why it's really hard to make a game with mechs in it, because the problem that you have is if you make it too responsive, then it doesn't feel like you're in a mech. It just feels like you're a person and you've got some robot-y stuff on.
Yeah.
But you also don't want it to be too slow, because then it just feels bad in general. But you need it to lag just enough where it feels like, yes, I am the player who is now doing the input on the mech to make it move in that way, which is usually why I end up liking the more tactical Gundam games, because they don't have to worry about that. Like I'm moving a thing from point to point. It's not an action thing, and that's it's much harder to pull off something with that.
They had the more nimble Titans that were smaller.
But even when they're nimble, like it's not as nimble as your character.
Yeah, you're not wall running,
and
sliding.
I know we joke about it a lot, but I have it here to talk about tonight, and now it feels like a good time to bring it up. Is what Chase brought with like when you become the suit. Like Anthem felt fucking good. Like that game had a ton of problems, but its problem was not how it felt when you were in those suits and flying around in those suits before they would overheat. Felt really, really
so
good.
Fun.
And that was the most disappointing part to me of Anthem, is that the flying around felt so good that it was such a bummer that you couldn't infinitely fly around, and I could not see a reason why.
100%.
Like, why would you do that? Why would you limit people? Like, I don't think it was stopping.
No,
I don't think it was doing anything interesting for the combat to force you to not be in the air all the time.
And also just made getting around the world more of a hassle.
But like even having that where you would have like the big ass combo that would break whenever you would do something with your friend, like that felt really cool, especially from an audio standpoint. But your point when you said, I think you said like being in the suit, like keeping up with the suit, it didn't feel as important, which is true. Like you just felt like you were a badass. There was no relationship with that suit. Like you felt it was more like I'm Iron Man versus I'm hanging out with this mech, that there's a relationship there. So Anthem, I think, is a game that we talked earlier about, like, games might feel really good but not be necessarily good games, and I think that Anthem is like maybe the example
Prime
for
candidate.
that. Like, it felt fantastic, the shooting felt good, the abilities felt good, the flying felt good, everything to get there.
I don't know if I'd agree with the shooting, but I mean, that's more of an agree to disagree. The flying definitely felt awesome.
And I think that that's a game that we can probably look back and be like, yeah, you know, like, I hope, like, I really do hope that BioWare takes some of those things from that dead game and puts them in maybe some of their future stuff, like, because it felt so good, or like expand upon that. Like, I'd like to see what they do with it, because what a waste to not use it.
Hey, speaking of wastes,
Uh-oh.
how many hours have you played Destiny, Chase?
Good question.
So Destiny is a game that I thought of, obviously, because the shooting does feel
bring it
so
up
good
all the time.
It's the
And
reason we
say
play
that
the game.
exact
So here's
yeah.
here's my question to you, Chase.
Mm-hmm.
If Destiny did not feel as good as it does to play, would we have gotten a Destiny 2? Like, if that game launches in the state it did, and the shooting doesn't feel very good, do they make a Destiny 2? Or does this thing just
I don't
sit,
think the
like,
shooting
crash
can
and
save that, man.
I
don't
guess
think
it's. I think it's a weird question because I don't think Bungie's made a bad feeling video game.
Right.
So it's just. I don't think Destiny is all that cool if it doesn't feel as good as it does. That's something that you can always come back and rely on. But I guess I also just don't believe that Bungie would make a bad feeling game, because that's not.
No, neither do. That was not the point of my question. It was more like, was that its primary saving grace, you think? Or
Well, sure, because I mean the story was a mess. Everybody thought that, and there were plenty of problems on all different fronts. But you could always fall back on.
Hey,
feels good to shoot these guns though. Like the shotgun feels chunky, and it goes a lot to those sound effects. It goes a lot to
these numbers are getting pretty
rumble.
Big.
Yeah, the numbers popping off enemies, like, that's always felt good. It's one of Borderlands' few remaining things that is good about that game. Yes,
the casting though, I think, has a weight to it also. Like, when I throw the Void as a warlock, like,
when I'm shooting that lightning from my hands,
they do a good job of making that feel like you're heaving something that has the magnitude of a black hole.
Mm-hmm. And with warlocks, like, you can even hold those grenades to do other stuff. Yeah, it's to throw out the more powerful, like the handheld supernova, like all that stuff.
That was an inflammatory question. I wasn't being sincere.
I think the testament here, though, is like, how many, like, let's just do it really quick. We don't have to list them all, but, like, we're not even going to list them. Like, we can just say rhetorically, how many Destiny killers have come and how many have went. Like, we talked about Anthem, like, that wasn't a Destiny killer by nature, but, like, people automatically make the comparison.
Playing in groups of 3,
right?
Like, it's
Division's
it's taking a lot of those things.
Yeah, just are we talking about anything that's a live service shooter game? Because then that's
so, but, like, I think to your point, Johnny, like, everybody knows what they're getting with Destiny. They're getting the prestige of Bungie. The feel is there, and I think the lore's cool.
Yeah,
it's a cool setting.
Yeah, even if this strike or whatever isn't that interesting, at least I know it'll feel good when I'm shooting those aliens,
Yeah, doing the Titan jump and then being able to do, like, the little jetpack float and having, like, they even have 3 different kinds of jumps for the Titan. And I think all of them feel good, and they work in different situations. The same for not the same for the Hunter, because you're only going to do triple jump. Everybody knows you're only going to do triple jump, because triple jump feels so fucking good.
And you don't play as the Warlock because their jump is shit.
Because their jump is floaty as shit, but they have other things that make them feel good as well. Yeah. Part of the thing is that feeling doesn't always mean that something should feel good. In fact, like, thinking about Destiny, one of the worst feeling guns in that game that still feels good in, like, the overall is something like Fourth Horseman, which is an exotic shotgun that has 4 barrels on it. And the point is, it is so powerful that gun kicks. And it's in full auto as well, so that thing kicks 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 4th shot, you're not even hitting anything because you've spent all your shells and then you're just shooting the sky. But it feels good in that, holy shit, the thing is powerful. It's so powerful, I can't even control it. That's how powerful it is. And then you get the catalyst that says, by the way, it can shoot a fifth shot for no fucking reason. Where does that barrel come from? Who knows? But I was like, I can't even contain this thing. This is so much power. And it feels bad, but it feels good that it has those options to it.
Yeah,
there's a trade-off. Those trade-offs feel good.
The worst part, and I don't know what they can do to make this better. I mean, I don't have an answer in this conversation, but I think the sparrows are a bit of an oversight on how they could make those feel.
What do you mean? They had Sparrow Racing.
I know they did.
Sparrow Racing was real good too.
Sparrow Racing was fun, but I think that I would like a little bit more of a difference in those sparrows. Like, I would like to have one.
Oh, you mean as far as how they handle?
Mm-hmm. Like, I think
that's fair.
Like, give me more of like I want one that's built for withstanding like damage. I'd like to have one that's built for speed. And make them feel that way. Where like I was hoping like a game like Sable would feel a lot better than what it actually did, and I had hopes that would feel more like a Sparrow and then some, where it really felt pretty underwhelming to be on something that was supposed to be like this huge ritual of the game. Like, it really, when you talk about game feel, like, I had an expectation, whether it was realistic or not for a game, that I had concocted this fucking headcanon for like why it should feel a certain way or what it would be. And then when it didn't deliver on that, it pushed me away so hard from the game that like I kind of bounced off of a game that was high up on my most anticipated list that I didn't even go back and finish. And that's not the game's fault to a degree, as much as it's like my expectation setting unrealistic, desires for this game. But those two just couldn't coordinate. And I think that in itself is also a conversation around feel, where is it our expectation of how feel should be versus the intention of a developer for what they envision for their game? And is that us aligning with a vision, or is it us having friction against it? Because is the game doing what it's designed to do and how they tested it to do, and it's just us? Like, so I think about that too, especially when we talk about games that like I think we'll get into here of I did not care for because of how it felt, where that might have been intentional. Like, maybe that's why it is the way it is. And maybe it's just you're being a dummy, Bobby, and you shouldn't be thinking that way. So those are things that like,
well, I wasn't going to say that.
I mean, this is wading into dangerous waters. But I only bring it up, one, because a sequel is just about to come out, and two, because they came out around the same time. But you had Breath of the Wild, and you had Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yep.
And in one game, you could climb on anything, and you'd have a meter, and it felt good. I usually don't like meters like that. Like, if you can climb, let me climb.
Right.
But there is something really cool and nice about that, in that it gave you that anticipation. Am I going to be able to climb up the rest of this mountain? Do I have enough stamina meter left to keep my glider going?
Do I have any
before I
potions
can get over this river?
So I can make it up this mountain?
And then you had Horizon Zero Dawn over there on the other side, where Aloy is jumping at rocks that don't do anything because only specific rocks were climbable. And that's something that they're specifically addressing in the new game. And I actually really like the way they're addressing it. I like the way that you kind of go into this almost Batman detective vision, which is another very good feeling system.
Yes.
But this idea that it's lighting up like constellations where you can run around on the rocks, which I think feels even better than something like Uncharted.
I was jumping out of rock in that game.
Yeah, me too.
Sure.
Yes.
Like all this like knee-high cover that I feel like, I should just be able to jump over, and the game would go, nah, you can't do that. And you'd go, why? Why can't I do that? This is an open world game. I should be able to move around the open world. Yeah, and Zelda's right fucking here, and it lets me do that. What's wrong with you?
You can climb anywhere you want in that game. You can go anywhere you want in that game, but your sword's going to get tired if you.
It's going to get real tired.
I know that feels good to some people. That there's something that feels good. There is something that feels good about breaking the weapon. The idea in Breath of the Wild that when you break a weapon, it does double damage. I love the idea that like this final shot, I'm going to put everything into, and it's going to shatter, and it's going to make those freeze frames when it connects, and it's going to make that explosion, and it's going to sound good, and it's going to rumble and feel good in your hands. All that feels good, and then I realize I don't have a weapon anymore, and I feel so impotent that it's like, oh wait, I actually don't like the way this game feels at all.
Yeah.
After the fact.
You throw it and then you pick up a stick off the ground. And
sure. And then you bring up the whole process. Okay, I need to build this stick up to a iron sword, to a good sword, to like the big flaming weird thing. Yeah.
It's a good point. Like, that's a really good point, Chase. Like those two games, because they couldn't be more different, right? But they can also be lumped into like, this is a genre of an open world, especially with Zelda going that direction. And they came out within a month of, like, it was a month between them.
It was a week.
It was a no.
I think it was the same week. Yeah, it was really close.
It was very close together.
Yeah, because it was middle of March, early to mid March for the Switch and Zelda, and Horizon was late January.
Came out February 28th. It's Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh, okay.
And Breath of the Wild would have been what, March 7th, March 3rd. So yeah.
Okay.
It's less than a week.
Yeah, because I remember.
Like,
3
days.
It broke my brain in a way.
Yeah, in a
so I was like, wait, what do you mean? I God damn it. And
we're back to the same problem for Johnny. And Johnny's like, do I play Horizon or do I play Elden Ring? They're coming around at the same time. What do I play?
I'm going to play Horizon for a week and then...
But I do agree that, like, did the Guerrilla Games think about that? Was that something that, like, they just couldn't... Like, this, I think this was their first genre.
Yeah.
Like, their first attempt at this genre.
I don't
the first
know.
thing that was Killzone, yeah.
Yeah, as far as I know, they'd only made Killzone.
Like one of those things where it's like, maybe they were just tapped out, right? And maybe they, like, at the time, like, Zelda obviously changed things for a lot of things. But when I look at what they were doing, it's so hard not to make that comparison from a timing and just, like, the aspect of what was going on. And it did feel really bad. But
there were also plenty of other games that let you go over that kind of ground. Like, I think about like Gears of War that had the cover system, and the mantling, and the way all that stuff worked.
Right.
And they're absolute, like, even Mass Effect, which I don't think felt very good to run around in, especially the original, but even the second game. The third game, I think, felt better to play in that sense with the cover mechanics. But
you said
you were able to
Gears.
mantle and do things.
Yeah, you said Gears and the sprint in Gears.
Sure. The roadie run. Yeah.
The cameras. Man, it's just
nailing the chainsaw too. I mean, like, just the finishers in that game. I think blowing
the sound, the resistance of that, the way the shotgun, like that. If you want to talk about chunky shotguns, active reload, absolutely. Like, all that stuff feels great. Good. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's the most redeeming quality of Gears. Is it, because what else is it? Like, it's a pretty dank looking
like,
game.
Running by somebody and just sticking a grenade on them. Like, we should just really... Gears was on a different level with that. Like, Gears, in a lot of ways, I think Gears felt way more modern than what we probably realized. And I think that people are still chasing some of those things with Gears today.
I think they realized it because it kind of ruined gaming for a generation where everything had to have half-high cover and everybody had to duck underneath that, to the point that you had games that specifically said, okay, we need to figure out ways of not making you do cover. Like, I think about Outriders. Like, that game is like, we have cover, but in fact, like, we know that cover is a poison that the last generation gave, or 2 generations ago gave us. We need to figure out ways to discourage you from using cover despite having it. How can we do that? By having people who teleport, by having people who can build their own kinds of cover, by, like, you need to, like, even something like Doom 2016, that's actually even a better example. Yeah. Like, that game does not let you hang back and just take cover and do whatever. You have to get up in people's faces to be able to get the power-ups that keep you alive.
Dude, Doom 2016,
not and the newest one, though.
What?
I mean, the newest one still feels good for a lot of the similar ways. I think they actually overcomplicated things by adding too many systems. Bit. But also, if they gave us the exact same game they did before, I don't think people would have been happy about that either. So it's a tough situation.
There's just a fluidity to that combat that, like, you got to get in that ass, so to speak, you can't. There's no backing away from this fight. You're the goddamn Doom guy.
Johnny,
I
got two games here that I don't know if there's going to be an organic way. I don't think we're going to talk about the genres that they're from to bring them up.
Okay.
From a feel standpoint, and one's a little bit more obscure, but I'd love to know like where you two land on this, because I don't think it's a stretch. I really don't. But I put down on my list. I put down Tetris because I think there's a feel.
I have Tetris on my list.
Okay. Cool.
I had a whole puzzle I had puzzles
I can written
down. And I think there are good feeling Tetris games and bad feeling Tetris games.
And I do have different genres laid out here, but this can also just be an organic conversation.
The other game I put down here, because I'll wait for us to get to Tetris then, because I don't think you're gonna have this one down. I put down Sea of Thieves, because being on a boat, being on a ship, like I know that like that kind of was a bummer at some point since the Assassin's Creed games. But Black Flag did a pretty good job with it. But there's something about the way that being on the water, the immersiveness of being on the water, and how they've made that feel. In
some good-looking water too, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks incredible. But the bowing of the ship and like knowing how to use your like the different heights and levels of everything, but just how you can make that work, and like even the cannons and like having to patch things up and get water off of it, like the whole aspect of working with your crew. There's something pretty remarkable about how they made that game feel in that sense. I don't know if there'll be a chance to bring that game up later on, but I think Sea of Thieves, when I think about game feel, like that's really all I think about when I think like that water sure does feel really good, and they nailed. It felt like I was sailing a ship.
Yeah,
when that was on there.
Yeah, so I have a few other genres I jotted down here. Action RPGs being one. We talked about Breath of the Wild a little bit. And like for Breath of the Wild, like the feeling of Breath of the Wild is inhabiting the world itself. Not knowing what's over that next hilltop, stumbling across some ruins, like seeing stone monuments that could mean nothing, or it's a puzzle of some kind. And I said it's a buffet of the most delicious food you've ever tasted, and once there, never seems to diminish no matter how many times you go back for more. Like it felt like no matter how many times I went back to that game, I was finding something new and interesting to discover, and there was a feeling of exploration and limitless potential, right? Like I remember when I found Eventide Island, and it's like, okay, all your shit's gone. You got to figure out a way to get off this island. And I don't know. It was just, I could gush about Breath of the Wild forever, and I won't. But like that game captivated me the way it did because of the way it felt to play and explore in that world. It was just a delight to be a part of that.
It didn't feel good. That had a really big world.
Halo Infinite.
No, that game felt fine. The world just sucks.
Oh, okay. Red Dead Redemption 2?
That's one of them. But I think that The Witcher 3 felt pretty bad. And I think
it's what made me bounce off it. Like that game has so many interesting stories in it from what I hear, and I wanted to be a part of that, and I just did not like the way all the different traps, all the different inventory management, the way that you have two different swords that I didn't feel like felt all that different. I know they do different things, but I just, in the moment, they didn't feel all that different to me. There was a lot of the way that game felt, and especially, we talk about something like Roach. That was something they went back in and had to fix because it felt so bad.
They had to change the way that Geralt felt to move. Altogether, there was a toggle. I had to beg Bobby to come back to this game.
Well, what happened was a few weeks after that game came out, Arkham Knight dropped. And you mentioned earlier, like the detective stuff in the Arkham games, and like even the traversal in those games feels really good. Like the fighting in that game feels really good. So I was like, fuck this, I'm bouncing back over to Batman. And then Johnny's like, hey, you got the game. They did just do an update where they fixed his movement. There's an alternative movement that you can go into and set. And it did. Like, it changed the game for me enough to, like, go in and try it and do it. But holy shit, man, like, that game felt really fucking bad when I first played it, to the point that I stopped. And I'm so happy I went back to it. But, and that was a decision.
I mean, I turned the difficulty all the way down in that game because I got tired of the combat, and
Right.
I just wanted to experience the stories they had to tell. And another game that I think of that way that I don't think felt as bad as The Witcher to play, but like Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
I thought the combat was just it's similar to how I felt with Guardians of the Galaxy. I was like, okay, this is just a thing that I have to do between story beats, and there's some cool tricks that I can do here, but I see what they're going for, and I don't think they quite threaded that needle.
It didn't feel very good
to
me, at least.
And so with that one too,
that's coming from the makers of Titanfall too. Like, wait a minute, like these. We know how these guys know how to make good feeling games. Why doesn't this one feel as?
So I have higher hopes for the sequel to that, but like, I remember playing it, and I had playing on a higher difficulty at first, I think, and I was like, man, this feels cheap. Like I'm not. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm losing not because of mistakes I'm making, but because the game is fucking me over in various ways, and so. With that one too, I turned it all the way down just because I wanted to see the story through.
And look, I'm gonna put that out there right now. Like, when we're talking about game feel, hey, it's nothing. There's not a fucking thing wrong with playing a game on easy. There's not anything wrong with playing a game on the hardest difficulty either. Like, play the game how you want to fucking play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I like.
We're not here to kink shame anybody for that.
Yeah,
that's
for sure. All right, Johnny. Let me just get it out of the system really quick.
Okay.
So. I think the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the most fascinating open worlds I've been in. I think Arthur Morgan is one of the most well-written characters I've experienced in the last decade.
Yep.
But I think that game feels so fucking shitty because of an outdated mechanic that they've used.
Wait a minute. Is it 2018? Yes. Go on.
I think that the game feels terrible. Everything about that game, the way that it inputs and plays, feels terrible. From trying to aim your gun, to get onto your horse, to interact with people in the community, to even move across camp, felt terrible. And it completely ruined a game that I know is very high for a lot of people, that I had huge expectations for myself. It just felt old. It felt pretty bad.
Yeah.
And like the same way that like you two have talked about Shadow of the Colossus, like I tried playing that remake and it just felt old. It felt dated. Like I couldn't get on board with the controls, and I knew I was missing something really special, but it just wasn't clicking for me. It didn't feel expansive. It didn't feel incredible like I knew it did at the time when it came out. It looked really good, and it loaded really good. It just didn't play really good. And I think that's the same thing happening with Red Dead for me. And
that was another example of like, okay, I can get by with what you're giving me here. This could be a lot better. I will be extremely surprised. Well, actually, no, never mind. Not surprised. I'll be very disappointed if the next Rockstar game they don't completely rehaul like
I think they're gonna
how those games feel to play, because it's been the same. I say that like it's been relatively unchanged since GTA 3. I feel like.
I mean, you're right, but I also stopped playing Red Dead Redemption 2, where I played through all of Red Dead Redemption 1.
Yeah.
And I think there's something different about those two games. Yes, they control somewhat similarly, and they still have a lot of that DNA pulled over. But there is something about Red Dead Redemption 2 where I think maybe they just overcomplicate things and try to give you too many options.
There's a deliberateness to the things that you have to do to interact with stuff in the world, and
like the calling card I see, and you'll see this, or I guess you won't see it now, but you saw it back then on sites like Reddit or just people showing off tweets. It's ha ha ha! I meant to pet the horse, but I ended up accidentally kicking the horse, and then it kicked me, and I died. It's like, well, yeah, you know why that happened is because the game has such weird controls, such complex things that you have to hold different combinations of buttons that you'll often mistap a button because you think it's going to do one thing and it actually ends up doing something else, and that feels bad. The games where like we talk about, where it feels like the controller is an extension of your hands because you just instinctually know what to do, like that contributes to like that game feel that makes it feel good. Whereas when something is overly complicated like that, it's like, sure, you have all these options available to you, but they're just so inaccessible. And I know, like, fighting games is one of the things that's on your list, Johnny. And I don't think any of us have enough experience in fighting games to really talk about it too much. But I think there is definitely something about. I think about a game like King of Fighters, which has very, very tight windows for their moves and incredibly complex combinations. And then I think of a game like Dive Kick that it literally is a single button game.
Yeah,
and those things. When you have less control or less things to do, you actually end up having more control. When you have less on the controller, you have more control. That's what I guess I'm trying to say.
One thing about Control that I'll call out really quick from a design standpoint is that game could have easily been like, hey, you have to find a highlighted surface that you'll be able to use telekinesis on and pull this part. But the way that they did that game, and I think one of the reasons why I think it feels so remarkable is that they didn't want you to worry about that. Like, your character was so powerful that you should have been able to establish, like, I can just it's telekinesis. I don't need to know where it's at.
I'm gonna rip a chunk out of this floor,
right? Like,
and throw it at somebody.
I don't have an object to grab. Oh shit! I'm going to deconstruct the environment, and the fact that would automatically come my way, and I didn't have to aim too much, worked out in a really cool way because your ammo, you didn't have ammo, you recharged your ammo, like it just replenished over time. And so, like, they wanted you to go back and forth, like use up your kinetic abilities and then use your weapon. That felt so good. And being able to fly around and hover and have these battles of ripping apart. Like, when I think about a game that could have really got inundated with like old school tactics, like the Horizon problem of, I can't make it over this half step. Like, that's a game that could have easily got tripped up in one of those, like, you need to be able to look at your environment, tear it apart, or control a little bit more and aim it and do those things. And that would have felt very cumbersome. And I think that Control did such a remarkable job of making you feel powerful and that you could be in those environments and take them apart. And that is one of the absolute best feeling games I've played in a very long time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's,
something interesting to me is that oftentimes when games feel fair or are tuned to be fair, they actually end up feeling less fun. I know one of the big examples I can think of, kind of going back to platformers, is you'll have a lot of platformers that let you jump even like a couple pixels off a platform. Like, you're running off a platform, and you kind of get those Wile E. Coyote frames where you are not actually on anything, but the game still gives you that little bit of buffer that you're able to jump then. And that feels good to people, and people like the way that feels. And those same people, if you had it, if you're a pixel off of that platform, you're falling. That people would say, well, this feels unfair. This doesn't feel fun, even though it literally is fair. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting in how a lot of developers will find little ways to actually push the game in your favor, because that's what feels fair to a player. Like, the biggest one I can give, and I know this is a weird one, because why would a turn-based strategy game need feel? Like, what's the feeling there? It's turn-based. It's like there's nothing to feel, right? Well, I think of something like Fire Emblem. Of course, I'm going to bring up Fire Emblem. But Fire Emblem, especially the Game Boy Advance ones, their math is actually wrong. It's lying to you, but it's lying to you in your favor, because the way they work, I don't have I have the specific formulas in front of me, but the idea is that if an attack is over 50% to hit, what the Fire Emblem games actually do, those Game Boy ones, they actually roll 2 dice in the game's memory in the computer. And those 2 dice between 1 and 100, well, actually they change depending on what your actual weapon accuracy is supposed to be. They roll those 2 dice and they average those numbers out together. And it means by averaging that, it actually ends up making it less possible to get the extremes one way or the other, and you end up getting more things that are in the middle, which means you end up getting more hits when you are over 50%, because the game is kind of biasing things in your favor that way. And if it's under 50%, it's actually biasing you the other way. So it makes it feel more fair to you that you're actually landing more hits when you think you should be landing them, and missing. And usually it's the opponent. The opponent misses you more, even when statistically they should probably be hitting you more. If it's a 30% thing, they should be hitting you 3 out of every 10 times. But it feels like they're hitting you maybe once, or maybe not even that, and that's due to that fudging. Whereas a game like XCOM Enemy Unknown does not fudge those numbers.
Right.
Like, those are the true accuracy things, and that's why you get memes of going, I had 99% a point-blank shotgun thing on this sectoid, and it missed? It's like, yeah, because 99% means there's a 1% chance, and that 1% chance comes up way more often than you think it would. It's just that your brain blocks it out that you've hit the other 99 times.
Your whole crew gets eliminated.
Right.
As you guys are familiar with. I want to talk about Hades. I think Hades is one of the best feeling games that has come out in a good long while.
What about Hades feel?
So, I mean, it feels good from the start, but as you progress and unlock more of the weapons and the hidden aspects to those weapons, that changes their nature dramatically in some cases. And also, as you're progressing, you're picking up these boons, and the way that this boon interacts with this boon can completely change how you tackle, the next room. Like I can never remember the name of the gun, but the gun is my favorite weapon in that game.
Yeah, the rail.
Mm-hmm. There's one particular boon that you get that gives you unlimited ammo, but you can only fire in a 3-round burst.
Yep.
And I get so excited anytime I want to run, and I get that one, because I can just hold that trigger down and slide around the room that I'm in and fire off the missiles that go in, the mortars that go. Mm-hmm. There's another mortar upgrade that lets you shoot, I think, 5 at once, and you can cluster them close together or spread them really far apart. And I don't know. I think everything about that game feels good to play. Like,
I would agree, and I think specifically though, like that game has to be equally as responsive to traversing through an environment to protect yourself as it does allowing you to be devastating in the environment. And so what I think is really fascinating about that game is that, yeah, you can get boons, and that's more of like a luck of the draw, right? Like, that's just random shit. You can kind of get an idea of like, okay, I know that this door's this, but at the end of it, like, you need to have a game that can function pretty much on its own with the weapon you choose and the movements it gives you. And you can expand on those a bit more, but like, if you strip them down to that core layer, you have to be able to move around an environment, protect yourself, and get away from harm, and then dish that harm out. And I think that the game does that concept so well, to a degree that, like, you mentioned the gun, that game can feel remarkably different with each weapon. And I think that,
absolutely,
like, if you think about from a development standpoint, they could have easily been like, you get a sword and a shield. Like, that's it. Like, make the run happen. Like, you can upgrade it, you can get some boons for it. But no, like, you get each one of these weapons, and there's trade-offs with it. And that game feels very different from when you have the rail in your hand to where you start it with a sword. And I think that is pretty fucking insane to see that the developer put that much care into a very different video game with each one of those weapons. And I think that's
we had a whole category in our game of the year that what was our favorite Hades weapon, and that discussion kind of could go anywhere, and I think it kind of did, but a lot of it boils down to the way those weapons make you feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think all those weapons felt good in their own distinct ways, but I could think of, like, oh man, it really ended up hurting my finger, like calling back the spear, and doing all the teleporting and throwing and running, and like, I was cramping up because that thing would go crazy. But that was because my go-to weapon was usually the Aegis shield, and I would throw that out. I got the one I got the aspect thing that turned it into like the buzzsaw that you could just throw out, fire, and forget it. So I was throwing that out, and then I was running around and attacking things with a normal attack, and that felt really good to me because I wasn't actually mashing the button all that much. So when I went to a weapon that was, hey, this one's actually really mashy, it felt way different and good in a different way. And I think that really contributes to that game, is that variety, that amount of different feelings you can get.
Are we going to be able to talk about how good the fucking axe in God of War feels, Johnny?
Yep. God of War, this is... Yes, that is absolutely one of the best feeling things in a video game. And may the man who designed that rest in peace.
And we've had... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the guy, one of the people primarily responsible for the way that weapon feels, he passed away last year. So it's, respect.
And we've had... Oh, it's just that we've had weapons that return to your hand before. That's not a new thing for video games.
No.
Right.
But specifically the way God of War made it feel,
yes,
where that thing sticks into stuff and you can see it being stuck into things, and when you call it back, it has that, you can see it on the screen and you can feel it.
Whooshing through the air.
You can hear it. Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of just see, okay, that's slowly gaining momentum, and then it's just slamming into your hand.
Hear that,
but it slams in.
Solid piece of wood hit.
You feel the rumble. You hear that kind of that wood sound as it clamps in there, and yeah, absolutely, all that contributes to a really good feeling system of that game. I've got other problems with that game, but like the feel of that axe is definitely one of them.
Yeah. What about? So you guys mentioned Dark Souls. You know how I feel about Dark Souls.
We do know how you feel.
People have talked ad nauseum about Dark Souls. And I think, Bobby, you put it very nicely. Like, you either love how that game feels, or you hate it.
Or you feel like me and Bobby.
Yes. Yeah. What about puzzle games? Thinking about this today. And Bobby, you mentioned Tetris. That was a game that I thought of immediately. And then another game that I wrote down. Chase, can you guess what it is?
I mean, what you would think, something you would have written down.
Something I would have written down. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, buddy.
Sure, yeah, like Puyo Puyo. Yeah, I think Puyo Puyo feels really good. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine especially, because I like the way that those sound effects go. I like the way that once you get into combos that last 3 or more, I believe, there's a sound effect that's just going, yeah! And if you can keep it going up, it just keeps yee-hawing. It gets this light orb that just comes out of your puzzle, your well, and it slams up into the top of the opponents, and you just see all those things chunk down on your opponent. All that feels stuff good. Contributes to that feel. Yeah. I was actually thinking of Meteos on the DS. Is one of the best feeling puzzle games ever. Like, that game, similar to something like Hades, every planet that you play on has a different physics model to it, and some of them have really gimmicky physics models to them. And so the point of Meteos, if you haven't played it before, it's kind of like Tetris, but instead of clearing blocks, those blocks, when you make a line or make the specific shape they want you to make, they will turn into rockets, and they will boost up on the screen. And what you want to do is clear those, is shoot those blocks off of your well, and then they'll land in opponents' wells. So it's kind of trying to manage that stuff. But there are some places. There's a planet that has really high gravity, but if you are able to get a vertical line of however many they need, those things will instantly rocket up and just completely clear the screen. But horizontal ones do nothing. And in the normal version of that game, horizontal and normal lines are able to rocket up in kind of equal amounts. But some of those physics change where it goes, okay, verticals do a little bit more, horizontals do a little bit less, or vice versa. And then this one specifically, it's like, horizontals don't do shit. You cannot do anything with horizontal lines. You only can do verticals. And some of that stuff gets really crazy, especially when you have multiple chunks of puzzle up at once,
Sure.
because they kind of gradually fall back down to the screen. So you want to try making more combos within those little chunks to keep further rocket boosts going and to combo it up. So maybe it's not completely clearing your screen, because that means a bunch of new stuff can fall, but you want it to just stay above where it keeps collecting stuff, and eventually you're going to be able to get so much stuff that when you rocket it off the screen, it just completely buries the opponents. And Meteos feels fucking good. Matt Jaguar and I gave it our favorite DS game of all time on Games on the Go when we did our top 25 DS games.
I remember that now.
Meteos is so fucking good.
Did you have anything for threes, Johnny?
I didn't have threes written down, but
that's
there's
like the UI of that. So like being able to slide your tiles into one another.
Yeah.
Like that's got a very satisfying click to it.
It does.
And to even half slide them. Like you can start to, and you start to see them kind of overlap. And you start to see like and I like the way all the tiles have little faces on them, so you can see like they're getting excited. Oh, we're gonna combine, and you go, no, I actually don't think I want to do that, and it's like, darn it. That's fantastic.
But yeah, I wanted to talk about puzzle and strategy games specifically because it's not. They're different than the types of games we've been talking about before. That you're usually moving around in a 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional space. And
I think it's easier to realize what's a good or bad feeling game in a more action-y game.
Yes.
Because like we said, it is so fundamental of what a jump feels like, or what how climbing works, or how shooting works. Like those are really easy concepts to be able to compare the two and go, this shooting feels flat and lifeless and terrible, and this one feels chunky and impactful. Like those are the kinds of words we use. Strategy games, it's like I mentioned before, it's really hard because
Bobby mentioned
so nebulous.
Threes, like sliding it, like that could only work the way it does on a touchscreen, right? Like you could, you click and drag a mouse, but there's something about you're putting your finger on this object and you're making it move across the screen, and you're seeing it respond to the movement that you're making it do. There's something about that makes the game feel as good as it does. And the people who designed it had to make those animations, and they probably gave great thought to like, okay, whenever they start to do this, they're going to start changing. Like, I don't know. Like, it's so cool. Video games are awesome.
Speaking of iOS games, like the one I am playing more than any other game is Hold Down, as you guys I'm sure have heard. In fact, at that Game Field conference that we talked about, one of the speakers was I believe you pronounce it Martin Jonassen. He's Scandinavian. It's hard. But he had a talk with another game developer that was specifically about game juice. And that's kind of their term that they use, is that juiciness feel. And what they showed, they actually gave this example to the audience in this 15-minute talk, and it started with a breakout clone. It was a game of breakout. You had your paddle at the bottom, you had the blocks at the top, and you were just bouncing the ball. And they programmed a really simple one. It was in black and white, and the ball moved, and this is all it was. And it was kind of boring. But then they kept adding on little things to it to help with the feel. What if the ball rotated? Because right now it's just this square pixel. What if it rotated as it hit things? What if it made a sound when it hit things? What if when it hit the wall, it would give a little screen shake? What if all these things? What if they put a little face on the paddle, and it made all those things feel good? That talk was came out 9 years ago. Hold Down came out 4 years ago, and you could see, I could see when I went back to watch that video, I'm positive that as they were showing things here, I could see like the gears turning for Jonathan of going, okay, this is fun. I should actually do something with this. And Hold Down kind of does that. You are aiming in a Peggle style way. You're aiming where the balls are going. Peggle, also a fantastic feeling game.
Oh yeah.
But in Hold Down, you're aiming where those balls go, and then those balls are constantly battering around these different
and there's numbers
these
on the blocks, and the numbers go down as you hit them, and
then they eventually break.
Yeah.
The best thing about Hold Down, though, to me, in terms of feel, is that every time those balls make contact, they go a little bit faster.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get to a point, if you can get those balls and you're shooting, you get to a point where you're shooting 32 at a time to begin with, and it gets up to 99. So you're just shooting this constant stream of balls that are bouncing around the screen. And if you get them stuck in a certain position, they just start bouncing off the walls and bouncing off stuff, and they're going so fast. And it's just going light speed, and it feels great because it feels like you've broken the game's physics, even though the game is specifically designed to allow you to do something like that.
Yeah.
That is something that makes me feel like, oh wow, that's great game feel. That's somebody who knows what they're doing.
We probably got to talk about it a little bit here when we talk about puzzles, especially knowing that our Monday night segment has been focusing on this for a few weeks now. But I think Portal absolutely has to be talked about from a feel standpoint. And from a puzzle standpoint too, like I had not personally really experienced anything quite like that game prior to it, and I think that it really changed how I look at like physics, and like it even taught me, like I knew about them, but like there was something tangible about inertia and movement and planning that went into that, and like even some of the puzzles that you and I stumbled into when we shouldn't have, that were a bit more advanced, where it's like, okay, you need to be timing these things and grabbing this, like there's something remarkable about like feeling that game. Like you're physically like, I need to be going this fast through that hole to get over there. Like
I need to fall this many times. Yeah, right. Dude.
I mean, if you want the best example of how much of a difference game feel can make, and I think polish is something. Game feel comes out of polish. I think the more you can polish a game, the more game feel kind of shows up. But the best example I could see is play Portal, and then go back and play that team's original game, their student game that got them bought by Valve, Narbacular Drop, and play that, because it is Portal. Like the mechanics are there. That's what Valve saw when they played that at some like IGF competition and said, okay, we need to hire this team and have them make this game. Narbacular Drop is cool. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when you compare it to something like Portal. Because when you have Portal, they're talking to Valve. They can pull from Valve's physics-based stuff, from all the Half-Life 2 stuff they just made. Right. They're pulling from all this stuff. They're able to polish that game to a mirror sheen, and the difference in how those games feel is enormous. And it really contributes to why Portal is one of the best games of all time, and nobody really talks about Narbacular Drop other than in the context of Portal because of that reason.
Yeah. I think we should maybe let's wind it down, guys. It's getting a little late.
I'll take us over to the credits here.
Okay. And I know we didn't cut. I had a lot of stuff written down here, and
we probably disrupted you quite a bit on this one.
No, this is basically exactly how I wanted it to go, because I wanted to hear what you guys thought, while also giving my own input. And I think this was a really fun conversation. We didn't really talk about fighting games or racing games. But as Chase said, like fighting games, not exactly our wheelhouse. We do like racing games here on the Casual Hour.
John, I mean, I think this is something that we can. I would be happy to have more of this conversation another time.
Okay, sure.
It's like Infrastructure Week, only it's Game Feel Week here at the Casual Hour.
Yeah, we can have a Game Feel Part 2.
Yeah,
sure, absolutely.
Down for that.
So yeah, that is a little discussion about Game Feel.
I would tell people, if you're interested in this topic, if you want to see more about ways to design video games, there's a really good YouTube series out there called Game Maker's Toolkit, GMTK.
I have a video of his I was going to maybe put in the note.
Tons of great videos. The one that you'd probably pull from, the Game Feel one, actually does go back and pulls from the Martin Johnson talk I also watched about the game juiciness. There's also another talk from that same conference from one half of Lambeer, not Rami, the other guy. His name's JW. And I don't think he gives a very good he doesn't present very well, but it's an extremely good talk in terms of content of just showing here's a shooter, here's a little side-scrolling shooter, and then here's a shooter with 30 different things that he put in the game to make it feel better, from increasing the fire rate of the gun to adding sound effects to having the Lambier screen shake, the patented Lambier screen shake. I think there are a lot of resources out there for people who want their games to feel better, and there's lots of things that you can pull from there. Because when I think about the iOS, or when I think about the App Store, when I think about Apple Arcade, when I think about the Switch, there's all this kind of shovelware, and you go through these things and you go, why do all these games feel bad? Why are they so bad? And then you watch a talk like this and go, oh, it's because they don't have muzzle flash on the gun. It's because they don't. Push that. Shooting the gun doesn't push you back that little bit that makes that feel all the difference. So it's a lot of really interesting topics to think about, but it all kind of gets nebulously thrown under this one term of game feel that is. It makes it difficult to talk about because it could mean so many different things, but those things really do make a big difference in your game feeling good or your game feeling terrible.
Yes, they do.
Johnny, this is a ton of fun. Do you want me to bring us home here? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of fun stuff going on the last few weeks. We did take Monday night off from that stream that we were talking about with our Best Buddy stream. We'll be back this upcoming Monday, though, where the gang will be back.
Probably had to kiss his wife or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Valentine's.
we've got a tradition of cooking and hanging out.
Eat a heart-shaped pizza.
No, I do. I make homemade lobster rolls. And so we had some lobster rolls on Valentine's, and we watched the Wedding Singer, which is a nice time. So shout out to my wife. She's awesome. Happy Valentine's Day. Got a quick look that went up on Tuesday for Ollie World, a game that I am very high on. Tonight,
feel good?
It feels really good. I think it feels great. We've got the deep dive you're experiencing now. Tomorrow we've got Dying Light 2 going up for a quick look, and then Friday night Johnny is going to be joining me for a little commentary, quick look action, but live for Horizon Forbidden West, one of our most anticipated games of the year. We will be recording a quick look of that over the weekend as well. So if you can't tune in Friday night, or if you're trying to avoid that game, because we're going to be playing it, so we will be playing early parts of that game. So if you're trying to avoid anything, maybe come back later on and hang out with us.
What you shouldn't avoid, though, is all of our new chat rewards that Bobby has so expertly created.
Yes.
There are some really good ones in there. So if you want to play around with those, definitely come by the Friday stream.
Yes, we will have those live on our Fridays and Mondays. You can follow along and chat there, but at the Casual Hour, wherever you are on social, youtube.com/casual hour, and then right here at twitch.tv/casual hour. Chase, you and Johnny have been busy, and you've been busy. What is going on with Gamers on the Go?
Gamers on the Go, let's see. Johnny and I recently recorded an episode of Gamers on the Go about the Analog Pocket, and that was a lot of fun. It's a great little system. Johnny and I had a good discussion about it, and also about some original Game Boy sports titles that were maybe not good, but at least interesting. I can announce that there's going to be a new episode of Gamers on the Go that is being recorded not this weekend, but I think the weekend after that. I mentioned that Jiggy-san, Magic Air, one of our good friends here on the Casual Hour, he and I did an episode talking about the top 25 DS games. Well, now we're going to go a generation below and talk about the top 25 Game Boy Advance games.
Ooh.
That'll be a fun conversation. And I have to cram a lot more to remember if I like some of those games or not. And it's going to feel real great because I got them all on an analog pocket. So that's Gamers on the Go. You can find out more about that at gamersonthego.com, or just check the links that Bobby threw in chat. And then also, I've got a YouTube channel, Chase K Plays, and Johnny and I have been working on a Pokemon Shining Pearl Nuzlocke. First time that either of us have ever done a Nuzlocke before. and I'd say it's going well. We got what? Did we get our sixth badge?
Yeah.
Yeah, got our sixth badge on the last episode, and that episode went out today. So you can 2 days ago. Doesn't matter. It's out. It's out right now. Go watch us play more Pokemon. A game that feels okay. From a game feel perspective, I think they could have done it. It's been fun doing that Nuzlocke with Johnny, and we're gonna get through it.
Awesome. Johnny, thanks again for putting us together. I had a ton of fun talking about this stuff with you both. I think it was a really good conversation. We will be back Friday night with a little bit of Horizon Forbidden West. Next week, we've got some fun stuff, so tune into our social. We'll be posting our schedule for next week. We've got some good ideas there already. And if you want to hang out with us or say anything, swing by Twitter and one of those places and say hi. We'll be in touch with you all. And Johnny, thanks again. It's been awesome.